The first thing they took from Thomas Rourke was the paper cup of coffee in his hand. Not because it spilled, not because it smelled bad, not because it belonged to anybody else, but because Mrs. Marla Vance said the country club didn't allow outside food or vagrant behavior, and she pinched it from his fingers with 2 manicured nails as if it were a dirty rag. The coffee had cost him $1.19 at a gas station outside Mill Creek, and he had bought it mostly to warm his hands. November rain had followed him all the way from the state highway, turning the shoulders of his old army jacket dark and shiny, soaking the cuffs of his jeans, gathering in the cracked leather of the work boots he had polished the night before with a paper towel and a little black shoe grease he kept in the garage. He stood under the crystal lights of the Briarwood Country Club foyer, with his empty fingers curled slightly, feeling the heat of the coffee disappear from his palm, while women in pearls and men in blue suits looked over the tops of champagne glasses as though a draft had come in through the wrong door. Behind Marla, a gold banner stretched across the entrance to the ballroom. Rourke Children's Heart Fund. Annual Honors Luncheon. His last name had been printed in elegant script, silver on navy, with little embossed stars around it. Thomas looked at it for 1 second too long, and that was enough for Marla to notice. "Do not stand there gawking," she said, her smile still fixed for the donors passing behind him. "The service entrance is around back. Deliveries are handled through the kitchen." Thomas shifted the damp paper envelope under his arm. Inside were 3 things: a notarized letter, a photograph of a little girl in red mittens, and a small brass key tied with blue thread. He had carried that envelope in the glove compartment of his truck for 6 years, waiting for the day when it would matter more than his own pride. "I'm not making a delivery," he said. His voice was low and rough from years of diesel fumes, winter air, and saying less than he felt. "I was asked to come." Marla gave him the kind of patient look people give a dog blocking a sidewalk. "By whom?" "Dr. Helen Avery." The name made something flicker in her face, not respect exactly, but caution. Dr. Helen Avery was chair of the fund, chief of pediatric cardiology at St. Bartholomew's, and the only person in 3 counties who could silence a hospital boardroom by lowering her reading glasses. But Marla Vance had run Briarwood's front desk for 22 years and had developed her own small kingdom out of name tags, seating charts, and the ability to decide who belonged before they spoke. "Dr. Avery is speaking in 12 minutes, she said. "She is not receiving walk-ins." "I'm not a walk-in." "Then where is your invitation?" Thomas glanced at the envelope. The invitation had been mailed to his house 2 weeks earlier, but the rain had come through the kitchen roof again, and the card had stuck to a stack of insurance forms on the table. And when he peeled it loose, the ink smeared so badly that only the crest at the top remained. He had almost taken it anyway. Then his grandson Noah had needed a ride to school because the bus stop was too far in the cold, and Thomas had left the card by the toaster and forgotten it. "I don't have it with me," he said. A man nearby chuckled softly, and someone else whispered, "Of course he doesn't." Marla folded her hands at her waist. "Sir, this is a private fundraising event. Donors, physicians, invited families, and press only. I know what it is. Then you understand why we can't have just anyone wandering in off the street." The words were not shouted. They were worse than shouted. They were placed gently in the center of the room so everyone could admire them. Thomas felt every eye on his jacket, his boots, the gray stubble along his jaw where the razor had missed, the grease that never fully left the small cracks beside his nails no matter how hard he scrubbed with orange soap. He could have said his name. Not Tom Rourke, the mechanic with the failing lungs and a mortgage 2 payments behind, but Thomas Michael Rourke, the man whose late wife had signed the first check that created the fund on the banner, The man who had spent 17 years refusing applause while wealthy people learned to pronounce his last name at luncheons. He could have said that the children's wing at St. Bartholomew's carried no plaque because he had asked for none. He could have said that every blue folder in that ballroom contained a history edited clean of the woman who began it all at a Formica kitchen table with a coffee can full of change and a daughter who could not breathe without turning blue. But saying it would have made the room change for him, and Thomas had not driven 40 miles through rain to find out how they treated him. He had come to find out how they treated the next father who walked in without a polished watch. So he kept quiet. "I need to speak with Dr. Avery," he said. Marla's smile thinned. "Everyone needs to speak with Dr. Avery. Please step aside." A younger attendant in a black vest moved closer, uncertain, and a security guard posted near the coat room straightened from his stool. Thomas noticed the guard's name tag. Daniels. Mid-50s, careful eyes, bad knee. Daniels did not reach for him. He only watched, measuring the difference between a threat and a man being embarrassed. That small mercy settled somewhere in Thomas's chest. Marla turned to the attendant. "Please call Mr. Blevins." The attendant hurried away. A woman in a cream suit leaned toward her husband and murmured, "It's sad, really, but they should have handled this before guests arrived." Thomas heard her. He heard the rain ticking against the tall windows. He heard forks being laid out beyond the ballroom doors. He heard a string quartet tuning somewhere inside, one violin string squealing briefly and then correcting itself. He thought of his wife, Anne, standing in their kitchen 18 years earlier with hospital bills spread across the table, her hair still damp from the shower, saying, "Sick children shouldn't have to prove they're worth saving." Their daughter Lily had been asleep on the couch then, one hand tucked under her cheek, the scar from her first heart surgery still pink beneath her pajama collar. Thomas had been a night shift mechanic at County Transit, fixing buses with frozen hands. Anne cleaned rooms at St. Bartholomew's and knew which families slept in chairs, which mothers watered down soup, which fathers sold wedding rings in the parking lot before discharge. The first donation had been $73.04. Anne had written Children's Heart Help on the coffee can in red marker and set it beside the church basement coffee urn on Sunday morning. That was how it began. Not with a gala, not with engraved glass, not with women like Marla Vance deciding whether rain made a man suspicious. Mr. Blevins arrived with the confidence of someone who had mistaken a tailored jacket for character. His first name was Preston, though nobody at the club used it to his face. He was executive director of the Rourke Children's Heart Fund, a position created after the fund became large enough to attract people who understood donor cultivation better than sorrow. Thomas had seen him twice before from a distance, once at a hospital corridor dedication and once in a newspaper photograph, standing beside a senator. In both cases, Blevins had worn the same expression, humble enough for cameras, sharp enough for contracts. "What seems to be the issue?" Blevins asked, though his eyes had already finished their inspection of Thomas and dismissed the answer. Marla lowered her voice just enough to pretend discretion. "This gentleman claims he was invited by Dr. Avery. No invitation, no registration, and he refuses to leave the foyer." "I didn't refuse," Thomas said. "I asked for 5 minutes. Blevins gave him a bright administrative smile. 5 minutes from Dr. Avery at an event like this is worth about $10,000 to the fund. "Then I'll be brief." A few people laughed openly at that. Blevins did too, but softly, as though he were too well-bred to enjoy it. "Sir, we appreciate community interest, truly, but today is not a public clinic. There are families here who have been vetted, major supporters who have made commitments, and a program that cannot be disrupted." Thomas looked through the open ballroom doors. At the far end, on a projection screen, His daughter's face appeared in a slideshow. Lily at 7, missing 2 front teeth, wearing red mittens. Under it, the caption read, "For every child like Lily." His throat tightened so hard he nearly stepped back. That photograph had been taken behind their old house after the first snow of 2004. Anne had made the mittens from the sleeve of a red sweater because they could not afford new ones. Thomas had never given that picture to the fund. He had kept the only print in a cigar box under his bed, beside Anne's rosary and the hospital bracelet from Lily's last surgery. Someone had copied it. Someone had opened the part of his life he had kept private and placed it on a screen for donors to soften their checkbooks. "Where did you get that picture?" he asked. Blevins glanced toward the screen, then back at Thomas. "Archival materials. Whose archive?" "Sir, I'm not going to debate media sourcing with you in the foyer. That's my daughter." Silence fell in a small circle around them. Marla's eyes narrowed, not with sympathy, but irritation. "We have many families connected to the fund," she said. "That does not entitle anyone to create a scene. Her name was Lily Rourke." Blevins stopped smiling for less than a second. It was a tiny break, but Thomas saw it. Mechanics notice the faint knock before an engine throws a rod. Blevins recovered quickly. "The Rourke family story belongs to the fund's mission," he said. "We honor it with great care." Thomas almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because grief sometimes finds the wrong door out. "I'm the Rourke family." Marla gave Blevins a look that said this had gone far enough. Blevins stepped closer, lowering his voice so only those nearest could hear, which somehow made it more insulting. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but the founder's family has always requested privacy. We are not going to allow someone to exploit a dead child's name for attention." Thomas stood very still. The rainwater from his jacket had begun to drip onto the marble floor. One drop, then another. Daniels, the security guard, looked down at it, then at Thomas's face, and something troubled passed through his eyes. "You ought to be careful with that sentence," Thomas said. Blevins' cheeks colored. "And you ought to be careful where you make accusations. I asked a question, and I am answering it by asking you to leave." He turned toward Daniels. "Escort him outside. If he refuses, call Mill Creek Police and have him trespassed." Daniels came forward slowly. "Sir," he said to Thomas, and there was apology hidden under the word. "Let's step over here, okay?" Thomas looked at him. "You got family?" Daniels blinked. "Yes, sir." "Children?" "2 grown." Thomas nodded. "Then don't put your hands on a father in front of his child's picture unless you have to." Daniels stopped. The room seemed to breathe in and hold it. Blevins snapped, "Officer Daniels!" Daniels did not move. He kept his hands visible, open at his sides. "Mr. Blevins, he's calm. He is unauthorized. That ain't the same thing." It was the first honest sentence anyone in authority had spoken since Thomas entered the club. Blevins turned on him. "Your contract is with Briarwood, and Briarwood's obligation is to protect this event." "Yes, sir," Daniels said. "I understand." But he still did not touch Thomas. Marla's mouth tightened. "This is exactly why standards matter." Thomas turned toward her. "What standard?" She looked startled that he had addressed her directly. "Excuse me? The suit? The shoes? The invitation card? The way a person stands when you decide whether he's worth hearing?" "I do not need to justify basic security procedures to you." "No," Thomas said. "You just need to hide behind them." A tall man in a navy overcoat stepped into the foyer from the ballroom. Thomas recognized him from the newspaper. Councilman Reed Halpern, guest speaker, honorary co-chair, the kind of man who could cut a ribbon with one hand and pick a pocket with the other if the lighting was flattering. He had silver hair, television teeth, and a small American flag pin polished brighter than his conscience. "Preston," Halpern said quietly, "what's going on?" Blevins moved toward him, but Thomas heard enough. Claims to be connected to the Rourke family, Blevins murmured. No credentials. Possibly unstable. Halpern's eyes slid to Thomas, and in that glance, Thomas saw not confusion, but recognition. Not warm recognition. Not the recognition of an old friend. The recognition of a man seeing a bill he thought had been buried. Thomas knew him then. He had aged, gained weight, learned to smile for cameras, but 18 years fell away in a rush. Reed Halpern, standing in a hospital hallway in a cheap brown suit, not yet a councilman, telling Anne that a charity needed structure, that grieving people made poor decisions, that he could protect the fund from small-town mistakes. Anne had trusted him for 3 months. Then money began moving strangely. Meetings happened without her, and Thomas had found her one night at the kitchen table staring at bank statements with both hands pressed flat over her mouth. She died 2 years later, not from that betrayal exactly, but Thomas had always believed part of her heart had gone out then and never come back. "Reed," Thomas said. Halpern's smile did not move, but something behind it locked. "I'm sorry. Have we met?" "Once. I meet a great many people. You took my wife's coffee can off a church table and turned it into a ladder." Halpern's face hardened. "I think this man needs to be removed." Blevins seized on the sentence. "Daniels!" Daniels looked at Thomas, then at the banner, then at the projected photograph of Lily. "Sir," he said softly, "maybe step outside with me before they make this uglier." Thomas almost did. Pride was one thing, but there were children in the ballroom, parents with tired eyes and plastic hospital bracelets, and he did not want Lily's name dragged through the foyer like a wet coat. He had learned over many years that dignity often looked, to foolish people, like surrender. He turned toward the glass doors. At that exact moment, a small boy in a gray suit stepped out from behind the registration table. He was maybe 9, thin as a rail, with a healing incision visible above the open collar of his shirt. In one hand, he held a paper heart covered in glitter. In the other, he dragged an oxygen tank decorated with superhero stickers. "Mom," the boy whispered, but the woman beside him was frozen, embarrassed, afraid to pull him back. The boy looked at Thomas. "Are you Lily's dad?" Thomas's chest caved inward. "Yes," he said. The boy held out the paper heart. "They told us to make these for the Rourke family. They said nobody knew where you were." Nobody spoke. Thomas took the heart carefully. The glitter stuck to his wet fingers. On the front, in crooked letters, the boy had written, "Thank you for my surgery." "What's your name?" Thomas asked. "Caleb." "You doing all right, Caleb?" The boy shrugged with the ancient weariness of sick children. "I can go upstairs now if I go slow." Thomas nodded because he could not trust his voice. He crouched, his knees cracking, and held out the heart. "You keep this one. Give it to somebody who sat beside your bed when you were scared." Caleb looked back at his mother. She was crying silently. Thomas placed the glitter heart in the boy's hand and closed his small fingers around it. That's who earned it. The room had changed. Not enough, but some. The donors were no longer entertained. Marla looked irritated by the inconvenience of compassion. Blevins looked worried. Halpern looked furious. "This is manipulative," Halpern said, too loudly. "Using a child as a prop is beneath contempt." Caleb flinched. That did it. Thomas rose slowly. He had swallowed a great deal in his life. The taste of hospital vending machine coffee at 3 a.m., the humiliation of asking for extensions, the way people spoke louder to him when they thought calloused hands meant a slow mind. But he would not swallow a powerful man frightening a sick boy to protect a lie. "Don't you raise your voice at him," Thomas said. Halpern lifted his chin. "You don't tell me what to do." I just did. Daniels shifted, ready now, not to seize Thomas, but to step between men if necessary. The string quartet inside the ballroom had stopped tuning. Dr. Helen Avery appeared in the doorway then, silver-haired, narrow-shouldered, wearing a black dress and a pearl pin shaped like a dove. She took in the foyer in one sweep. Thomas soaked and shaking with restraint, Caleb clutching the glitter heart, Blevins pale, Halpern rigid, Marla bristling, Daniels standing in the impossible space between orders and conscience. "Tom," she said. One word. Soft. Devastated. The way she said it traveled farther than a shout. People turned. Marla's face loosened around the eyes. Blevins opened his mouth. Halpern looked away. Dr. Avery walked to Thomas and, before anyone could stop her, put both hands around his wet, grease-stained hands and held them like something precious. "I was afraid you wouldn't come." Thomas looked down. Almost didn't. "Anne would have made you." A broken smile crossed his face and disappeared. "She always did." Dr. Avery turned to the foyer. She did not raise her voice. She had spent 40 years delivering unbearable news in quiet rooms. She knew volume was not the same as authority. "This is Thomas Rourke," she said. "Lily's father, Anne's husband, the first trustee of the fund whose name is on that banner. Without his family, this luncheon would not exist. This program would not exist. And many of the children in that ballroom would not have received help in time." Marla's lips parted. Blevins stared at the floor. Someone gasped. Thomas felt the room's respect arrive like a coat being thrown over his shoulders after the beating was finished. It warmed nothing. It came too late to matter to the part of him that had stood alone under the banner. Halpern began to clap. It was an astonishing choice, and therefore perfectly him. Two uncertain donors joined for half a second before realizing nobody else had. Halpern stepped forward with moist eyes manufactured on command. "Thomas," he said, spreading his arms as if greeting a relative at Thanksgiving. "My God, why didn't you say so? This is a terrible misunderstanding." Thomas looked at him. "No, Reed, it isn't." Halpern's smile trembled but held. "Emotions are high. Let's not turn a beautiful day into something divisive. You did that before I came in." Dr. Avery's eyes moved from Thomas to Halpern. Something old and hard passed between them. "Reed," she said, "we need to speak in the ballroom. Now." Blevins stepped in quickly. "Doctor, the program is scheduled to begin. We have press present. Perhaps we should move this privately." "No," Thomas said. The word surprised even him. He had spent years choosing privacy, believing silence protected Anne and Lily from becoming decorations in other people's speeches. But silence had not protected them. Silence had left room for men like Blevins to call his daughter archival material, and men like Halpern to pretend the ladder he climbed was a monument. He lifted the envelope from under his arm. Rain had softened one corner. "You wanted the Rourke story today. You can have it." The ballroom was full enough that the air felt warm and perfumed, heavy with roasted chicken, lilies, candle wax, and money. Round tables filled the room, each with a blue centerpiece shaped like a heart. On the stage stood a podium and a large screen frozen on Lily's photograph. Thomas followed Dr. Avery down the center aisle. Nobody had planned this entrance, and that was why it had more power than any procession. His boots left faint wet marks on the polished floor. Children turned in their chairs. Parents stared. Donors whispered over folded programs. At table 12, a woman pressed a napkin to her mouth. At table 4, a man quietly removed his phone from its stand and began recording. Thomas reached the front and stopped beside the podium. Dr. Avery stood at his left. Daniels remained near the ballroom doors, not intruding, not abandoning him either. Blevins hovered near the stage steps, sweating at the hairline. Halpern took a place in the front row, calculating angles. Marla stayed in the back, arms crossed, as if the building itself had insulted her. Dr. Avery touched the microphone. "Before our scheduled remarks," she said, "Mr. Rourke has something to share." Thomas had repaired engines in blizzards, crawled under buses on gravel lots, slept in vinyl hospital chairs with alarms shrieking overhead. He had testified once in a workers' compensation hearing with a lawyer trying to make him sound dishonest. None of it felt like standing before 300 people while his dead child smiled down from a screen. He opened the envelope. His hands were steady now. "My wife's name was Anne," he said. "Most of you know Lily's name because it raises money. Fewer know Anne's because she didn't photograph as well for brochures. She was tired most of the time. Worked housekeeping on the 6th floor at St. Bart's, packed peanut butter sandwiches in wax paper, cut coupons, sang hymns off-key when she was scared." A soft ripple moved through the room. Thomas unfolded the notarized letter. After Lily died, people brought casseroles. Then bills kept coming. Anne started taking a coffee can to church. She wanted to help one family pay for one prescription. That was all. One bottle of medicine. Then someone else gave $20. Then somebody's union hall passed the can. Then a truck dealership wrote a check. It grew. He looked at Halpern. And when it grew, people showed up to manage it. Halpern stood. "I will not sit here while my decades of service are slandered." "Then don't sit." The room went utterly still. Thomas did not say it loudly. He said it like a man offering a chair to be moved. Halpern's face reddened. "You have no idea what it took to build this fund into a regional institution." "I know exactly what it took. I have the canceled checks." Blevins whispered, "Mr. Rourke, please." Thomas held up the brass key tied with blue thread. This opened a safe deposit box at Mill Creek Savings. Anne put things there when she got scared. Bank statements, letters, meeting notes, copies of forms she said had been changed after she signed them. Halpern's anger drained into something more dangerous. Fear with a suit on. Those documents were reviewed years ago. "No," Dr. Avery said quietly. "They weren't." Every head turned toward her. She stepped closer to the microphone. "Anne brought concerns to me shortly before she became ill. At the time, I was a surgeon with no authority over the fund's administration. I advised her to seek counsel. She told me she had. Then Lily's anniversary came. Anne's health worsened, and the matter vanished into grief. I have regretted my inaction for 16 years. Thomas looked at her, surprised. He had not known. Dr. Avery's face did not protect itself from shame. That made the truth heavier. "This morning," she continued, "Mr. Rourke gave me permission to request bank access as a medical trustee and founding witness. The box was opened 2 hours ago in the presence of counsel." Blevins gripped the stage rail. "Counsel?" A woman rose from table 3. She was black, late 30s, in a dark green suit with a leather folder tucked under one arm. "Maya Whitfield," she said. "Attorney for the Independent Review Committee Dr. Avery convened last month." Thomas had never seen Blevins look small until then. Maya walked toward the stage, opened her folder, and placed several copied documents on the podium. She did not dramatize them. She did not need to. Preliminary review shows that in the fund's early years, administrative control was transferred through documents that appear inconsistent with donor intent. We also have evidence that certain family privacy requests were used to exclude Mr. and Mrs. Rourke from decisions while continuing to use their story in fundraising materials. Halpern pointed at Thomas. He disappeared. He wanted nothing to do with this. We carried the burden. Thomas leaned toward the microphone. My daughter died. My wife got sick. I fixed buses at night and changed her sheets during the day. I didn't disappear. I survived. There are sentences that do not need applause because applause would cheapen them. That was one. In the back, Marla looked down at the coffee cup she still held, as if noticing for the first time that she had taken it from a man whose grief filled the room. Thomas turned the photograph of Lily face down on the podium, not harshly, gently. Take her picture off the screen. No one moved. Now. The technician at the side table fumbled with the laptop, and the screen went dark blue. Thomas breathed easier when her face was gone. She wasn't a logo, he said. She liked tomato soup with too many crackers. She hated thunder. She made me check under the bed for raccoons, not monsters, because she said monsters were pretend, but raccoons had hands. When she was hurting, she'd squeeze my thumb and count ceiling tiles. Her mother started this fund because no parent should have to decide whether to buy medicine or gas to get back to the hospital. That's the story. Not the pretty one. The true one. Caleb's mother began crying again. This time she did not hide it. A man at a donor table removed his glasses. Dr. Avery stood rigid, tears sliding down without touching them. Halpern tried once more because men like him are built of last tries. Thomas, I understand grief can distort memory. Thomas smiled a little then, sadly. That's why Anne saved paper. Maya looked toward the doors. 2 uniformed officers from Mill Creek Police entered quietly, accompanied by a county investigator Thomas recognized from a brief meeting that morning. Not an arrest squad, not a spectacle, just consequence arriving on polished shoes. The investigator approached Halpern and spoke low. Halpern did not resist. He did not shout. His whole life had trained him to avoid scenes, and now that instinct betrayed him into looking almost dignified while he was asked to step into the hall. As he passed Thomas, he whispered, "You'll destroy the fund." Thomas answered, "No, you mistook yourself for it." Halpern's face twisted, but he kept walking. Blevins sat down on the stage steps as though his bones had lost their instructions. Maya spoke to him next, quietly, professionally, and 2 board members came forward with the stunned obedience of people realizing governance is not a word for letterhead. Dr. Avery returned to the microphone. The luncheon program is suspended, she said. All donor commitments made today will be held pending independent review. Families currently receiving assistance will not lose support. I give you my word on that. A donor in the front stood. And if the review confirms this? Dr. Avery looked at Thomas, not asking permission exactly, but honoring the source. Thomas thought of Anne's coffee can. He thought of Lily's red mittens. He thought of Caleb dragging his oxygen tank across a country club foyer while adults with clean hands called him a prop. Then the fund goes back to what it was meant to be, he said. Medicine, travel money, hotel rooms near the hospital, groceries when a parent misses work, no more selling dead children as decorations. The donor nodded slowly and sat. Marla moved along the wall toward the side exit, perhaps hoping to vanish into procedure, but Daniels stepped gently into her path. He did not block her cruelly. He simply stood there. "Ma'am," he said, "I think Dr. Avery may need your statement." Marla's face flushed. "I was enforcing policy." Daniels looked at Thomas, then back at her. "So was I. That don't make us the same." Thomas heard him and, for the first time that day, felt something like gratitude unburdened by pain. The room emptied slowly. Some donors left in silence, ashamed of their own uncertainty. Some parents came to Thomas, not to thank him exactly, but to touch his sleeve, to say their child's name. to let him know Lily's story had reached real beds and real bills despite the hands that had tried to own it. Caleb returned with his glitter heart and pressed it into Thomas's palm anyway. "My mom said you should have one," he said. Thomas crouched again. "Your mom's probably right about most things." "She is," Caleb said solemnly. Thomas tucked the heart into his envelope with the legal papers, and that nearly undid him. By late afternoon, rain had softened into mist. The country club parking lot shone like black glass. News vans had begun to gather near the entrance, but Thomas avoided them through a kitchen corridor that smelled of onions, coffee, and industrial soap. Dr. Avery walked beside him without speaking. Daniels followed a few steps back, carrying Thomas's empty coffee cup, which Marla had abandoned on the registration table. At the service door, Thomas stopped. Beyond the dumpsters and wet hedges sat his old pickup, one headlight clouded, the passenger door a slightly different shade of blue from a junkyard replacement. Dr. Avery touched his arm. "I should have done more for Anne." Thomas looked out at the mist. "A lot of us should have done more for somebody. That isn't absolution. No." He turned to her. "But it's a place to start." She nodded, accepting the mercy without pretending it erased the debt. "Will you serve on the interim board?" Thomas laughed once, tired and quiet. "Helen, I can barely keep my garage open. That may be precisely why we need you." He shook his head, but not as firmly as he meant to. "I don't know how to sit in boardrooms." "Good. The boardroom has had enough people who know how to sit in boardrooms." Daniels cleared his throat and held out the coffee cup. "I believe this belongs to you, Mr. Rourke." Thomas took it. The cup was cold and nearly empty. He looked at the guard's name tag again. "You ever need tires rotated, brakes checked, something like that, you come by Rourke's on County 6. Daniels smiled. "I might do that. And if they give you trouble for not moving fast enough today, you send them to me." Daniel's smile faded into something steadier. "I appreciate that." Thomas opened his truck door. The cab smelled like vinyl, old tools, peppermint gum, and the faint, damp wool scent of the blanket Noah used on cold mornings. On the dashboard, clipped above the speedometer, was a school photo of Noah missing one front tooth, so much like Lily at that age that Thomas sometimes had to look away. He sat behind the wheel but did not start the engine. Dr. Avery leaned into the open door. "Tom." "Yeah? Why today? After all these years, why come now?" Thomas looked toward the country club, where the banner with his name still hung inside, though he suspected it would come down before supper. He thought of the invitation smeared by rain, the photograph stolen from his private box, the letter from the fund asking him to appear for a legacy recognition moment, without mentioning that Halpern would announce a new administrative building named after himself. He thought of Noah, who had come home from school 3 weeks earlier, saying a classmate told him his grandpa was fake poor because real Rourkes have a foundation. He thought of Anne's safe deposit key, found again when the kitchen ceiling leaked and a water stain forced him to move the old cigar box. "Because my grandson asked me if our name belonged to us," he said. Dr. Avery closed her eyes briefly. "And what will you tell him?" Thomas put the glitter heart on the seat beside him. "That we got it back." The review took months, because truth moves slower than rumor and law moves slower than both. Halpern resigned before he was charged. Blevins was dismissed and later became a consultant in another state, where Thomas hoped someone would learn to read footnotes. Marla Vance left Briarwood after the club board discovered that humiliating founding trustees was bad for business, though Thomas took no pleasure in it. He had no appetite for revenge. Revenge did not refill coffee cans, did not pay for prescriptions, did not help a mother sleep in a motel instead of a minivan. Dr. Avery kept her word. Assistance continued. Administrative salaries were capped, family travel grants doubled. The glossy annual luncheon was replaced with a winter supper in the hospital cafeteria, where donors, nurses, mechanics, surgeons, janitors, and parents stood in the same line for meatloaf and coffee. The first year, Thomas arrived late because a school bus had broken down on Route 12, and he had stopped to help the driver get heat working before the children froze. He wore the same army jacket. Nobody stopped him at the door. Caleb, stronger now, ran halfway down the corridor before remembering he was supposed to go slow. Noah came with Thomas that night, carrying Anne's old coffee can. The red marker faded, but still readable if you knew how to look. They set it on a folding table near the cafeteria entrance. No plaque, no spotlight, just a slit in the plastic lid and a handwritten sign, "For the next family." People dropped in dollar bills, checks, quarters, whatever they had. A surgeon in expensive shoes folded a $100 bill until it fit. A janitor added 3 crumpled ones from his lunch money. A little girl with a bandage on her chest dropped in a purple button because she had no money and wanted to give something. Thomas left it there. Near the end of the evening, Dr. Avery tapped a spoon against a coffee mug and asked for quiet. Thomas stiffened, expecting a speech, but she only said, "Anne Rourke believed help should reach people before pride had to ask. We're going to try to live up to that." Then she sat down. That was all. It was enough. Later, after the cafeteria lights dimmed and volunteers wiped tables, Thomas found Noah standing by the coffee can. The boy ran one finger over the faded letters. "Grandpa?" "Yeah." "Was Aunt Lily brave?" Thomas swallowed. "She was scared a lot." Noah frowned. "That's not what I asked." Thomas looked at him, then laughed softly because the boy had caught him telling half a truth. "Yes," he said, "she was brave." Noah nodded, satisfied. "Are you?" Thomas thought of the foyer, the coffee taken from his hand, the banner, the way silence had nearly carried him out the door. He thought of Anne saving paper because she knew someday love might need evidence. He thought of Daniel's standing still when cruelty asked him to move. "Sometimes," he said. "Not always." Noah picked up the coffee can and held it against his chest. "Mom says that counts." Thomas put a hand on the boy's shoulder. Outside the hospital windows, snow had begun to fall, soft and slow over the ambulance bay, over the parked cars, over the old pickup waiting under a yellow light. Thomas could see his reflection in the glass. Wet boots, worn jacket, gray hair, tired eyes, no richer in appearance than he had been on the morning they tried to throw him out of a room built on his family's pain. But behind his reflection, in the cafeteria, nurses were laughing with parents. A doctor was helping stack chairs. Caleb was showing another child how to make superhero stickers stick to an oxygen tank, and Anne's coffee can sat heavy with small offerings from ordinary hands. Thomas stood there a while, saying nothing. He had learned that truth did not need to shout when it finally had a place to stand. True courage isn't loud. It's the steady voice that refuses to trade dignity for approval. Thomas Rourke walked into a glittering ballroom in muddy boots and was told he didn't belong, yet he stayed long enough to remind everyone why the Rourke Children's Heart Fund existed, not for banners, banquets, or polished donors, but for a child clutching an oxygen tank and a paper heart of thanks. His late wife Anne once said help should find people before pride has to ask, and Thomas chose that simple conviction over the crushing weight of embarrassment, reclaiming his family's name and setting the charity back on its true path. His stand teaches us that integrity isn't about grand speeches. It's about protecting the vulnerable even when powerful voices tell you to step aside. We all face rooms where we feel small, workplaces that overlook us, communities that doubt us. But when we speak up for fairness, we give others permission to breathe a little easier. If this story moved you, share the moment that taught you the value of standing firm in kindness. Drop your thoughts below, and let's build a thread of everyday acts of quiet bravery. Don't forget to hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another real-life lesson in compassion and courage. Together, we can keep turning glitter hearts into real-world change.